I'm Bambi Francisco with Vader TV, the network for innovators. Well, on Twitter, you never feel alone. It's like constant people watching. Well, joining me to talk about Twitter and how it's changing online culture and the way consumers are behaving and people are behaving is Jack Dorsey. He's the CEO and co-founder of Twitter. Jack, thanks for joining me again.
Thank you, Ben.
So your co-founder, Evan Williams, said, I've been trying to explain Twitter for a couple of years now. I read that somewhere. So how has your explanation of Twitter changed over the years as you've watched how people have used your site?
It's changed, well, it's changed in pretty dramatic ways. And it changes day by day, because the interesting thing about it is it's very different things to very different people, and everyone uses it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And that usage changes over time for that individual.
What was it initially when you first launched it?
Well, so my background is in dispatch. I spent the past 15 years writing dispatch software, couriers, taxis, 911. And you have all these, people roaming about a metropolis, constantly reporting what they're doing, what they're working on, what patient is going to the emergency ward. And I just found this fascinating because you get this beautiful picture of what's going on in the city. And the city for me was Manhattan, and there's a lot going on in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And I always wanted that for my friends. I wanted to know what's going on with my friends. This ambient, social awareness of what's happening. So that was the original idea, and that was reinforced by IM. You were just talking about before this interview, looking at your buddy list and seeing the away message and how people use that.
Right.
And at a glance, you could see what your friends were listening to, what they're reading, what they're working on. But the problem was you couldn't get away from the keyboard. You had to update it from your computer.
And you had to know the people. You couldn't follow what other people were doing. They would have to actually just ping you. It wasn't one-to-many back then with IM.
Yeah. So I mean, SMS came on the scene, and the common usage for that was this one-to-one social awareness. Like, what are you doing tonight?
Yeah.
How are you feeling? So mixing those two metaphors and those concepts together was the original impetus of Twitter, and that's how it began. So you could be anywhere, you could send out a message, and it would tell you all your friends what you're doing, and it would have that context, and it would make the world feel smaller through this constant awareness of what's going on right now with your friends. And it's more or less maintained that vision in that application, but it's added some new functionality. Like we were talking about in the previous interview, someone hooking up a plant, and news feeds getting on, and entities like JetBlue getting on, and people are using it in a pragmatic fashion, and using it as a game. There's a Tamagotchi service on Twitter, so there's all these different usages, but at its core, it really comes down to kind of this personal newswire feel of what's going on with the things you're interested in.
So, I was thinking, as I've been on Twitter a lot, and I've become an addict, and I'm surprised, but I when I've been on Twitter, especially watching it on IM, I have this feeling that I'm sitting in the cafe in New York City. I used to live in New York City, and it's like you love people watching and be just kind of observing. Yeah. And I was sitting there last night just observing people on Twitter, and I thought, well, this is kind of a new way to observe people. So what are you how is Twitter changing the way people are, I guess, socializing? I guess that's a form of socializing, but what have you seen? What else have you seen?
It's really, from my vantage point, it's lowering the barrier to entry for really sharing small details of life. So people are a lot more comfortable because of the constraints we put on the messaging, 140 characters. You can't really say a lot. The canvas size is very, very small. And with that constraint, the messages are more off the cuff and in the moment. And you share things that are more or less considered inconsequential. I'm not going to go up to the street, go up to you on the street and say, I just had a cheese sandwich for lunch. But I would say that on Twitter because I know that you might be interested in it, and if you are interested in it, that you'll follow me. If, say, you were my mom, and my mom saw that I was eating a cheese sandwich for lunch, she would instantly be brought back to my childhood or whatnot. So there's a lot of different contexts that the recipient brings to the messaging, and that's what I've seen change the most is people come on the system and they start learning